Oh, you're at Deep Focus. I'm your host, Mitch Goldman. We are listening today to November 28th, 2022, a Monday evening. Kicking it off at 6 p.m. NYC time. And my guest is Vernon Reid. Vernon, what are we going to talk about? Santana. Yes. What's Santana? We talked about that quite a bit. Vernon's idea was to take kind of the jazzier side of what Carlos Santana's done, which could be any of a lot of things. You know, he's worked with everyone from Alice Coltrane to Herbie Hancock to Wayne Shorter to on and on and on and on. And we zeroed in on this year of 1972, primarily instrumental music that he's doing, the album Caravanserai and live music around that. You've been listening. You know, if you didn't listen to parts 1 and 2, go check them out first. And if you did, by golly, here it comes, coming at you. Here's part 3. It's Deep Focus.
So it takes a risk factor, a necessary risk factor, which is the essence of art. You know, when that's taken away, you have a simulacrum. You can have a simulacrum of art where it's like, well, it sounds great, and obviously everyone's playing great, but what you're not hearing, is the soul of the thing. You know, because, you know, somebody's got their skills are at a high level, and theoretically and all the things, and they've got they got the chops to do it. And this is one of the problems. And it's a weird problem because who can assail, who can assail the virtuoso, right?
Well, yeah, I'm just, I was just going to say there's a lot of, at the same time, there's a lot of tumult in the makeup of Santana's band around this time.
Oh, sure there is.
This band did not last. I mean,
no,
you hear
it couldn't.
this.
Yeah, and this is it reminds me of that monologue by Tyrell in Blade Runner. You know, the flame that is twice as bright lasts half as long, and a lot of times you'll catch a band and they are in a thing, and and it can be an incredible experience, but what you're hearing is the sound of the thing tearing itself apart. That is unfortunately, because it's like I never promised you a rose garden. know, and so I think this is a thing at a certain point I think of even Coltrane's ensemble, the Great Quartet. I mean, there was a play, John was going into a place that was so avant-garde and so not referential to structures of the past, and it became very difficult. It became, I know for a fact that at one point, Elvin had started to have, a problem, especially when he started bringing in other sax players. And, you know what I mean? And that became a real issue. And that by the time you get to something that's so like an ascension, I mean, it's I can imagine that it became, if you were willing to play My Favorite Things for 45 minutes, but then the next step is something like Ascension. You know what I mean? Because even it's still graspable, it's still graspable, even though you're doing all this crazy I can't even say the word, you're doing all this, exploration and adventurous stuff off this, you can get to it. But when you get to a place where it's just about sound, and it's about sound that's abrasive, and the idea of that sound is to be transformational. It's to literally be transformational. And if you can't get to that, and a lot of times these things break down on what people can get to. So you got to see somebody, person that was on your squad, they were in it with you. But the where you're going is to an undiscovered country. You're going to a place where, the people didn't sign up for that.
Right. And that's just talking about what happens on the bandstand, let alone this one's got a drug problem. That one thinks they're a rock star. The other one,
it's because because these magnificent things are made and done by human beings. Like you see the actor, you see the musician, and you're not thinking about this person's relationship to their siblings. You're not thinking about that, and that's something that's living with them every day. Marvin Gaye was a hero to millions except to his pops, and his pops. I mean, one of the weirdest things, like, Marvin Gaye, the gun that wound up killing him, he gave that gun to his father as a gift. I mean, unpack that edible.
Yeah, right.
Unpack that edible pretzel. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that is
that's a Greek myth right there.
Many people what we're hearing when we hear these magnificent artists are, you're hearing a lot of things, and you're hearing things that you don't know nothing about. You're hearing things, and you're hearing experiences. For a Brian Wilson to do what he did, he literally. I mean, there's stories about what.
Did you watch that American Masters? They just did on PBS a whole doc walking through all that stuff with him. It was really
there was
striking.
one. I read some things about what he went through, and one of the passages, what his father. I'm not even going to mention it. His father did something to him that was so unspeakable. It was literally unspeakable. I think I put the book down and said, I can't. I'm not messing with it. It was really beyond. And out of that, Brian Wilson made music of angelic beauty. And but it cost him. I mean, so much of what we hear that's great, it cost. And the people that do these things, they live with what was done to them, what happened to them. And unless some other kind of work is enacted to change the course of things, I mean, you're hearing something lovely, and what you're not understanding is that is a result of the person that's making this lovely thing is living in a place of torment. And it's not even the most obvious thing, because you hear the scream of saxophone. Oh, that's a tormented dude. No, I'm not talking about the obvious things like that. And for a bit of beauty, for a bit of ease, spiritual ease, we're listeners are the beneficiaries of this thing. So we hear this lovely, these incredible voicings, this beautiful piano chorus. And you don't know that this person, was tormented to make that sound come out of them. So all of these things, when you hear about, the band, I mean, it took me a long time, like as a Mahavishnu fan, I just couldn't understand, like, what, this band was so incredible. And, and it really was heartbreaking when Rick Laird, because for the longest time, like all of the Mahavishnu guys are alive, right?
Right.
And then when Rick Laird passed, it's funny because he was the least sung of all of the musicians.
Yeah, bassist.
And he was
who became a very
wonderful, successful photographer.
Yeah.
But his playing, he was not Stanley Clarke. He was not a Jocko. He was, but the Mahavishnu Orchestra would not have worked if Rick Laird didn't hold down his parts the way he did. Like, he was a part of that ensemble, and people will discount him because he was not, quote unquote, impressive. But honestly, if you listen, that music holds together, and he literally gave the license for everyone else
for Cobham
to go completely nuts. He gave the license, and he was, and he kind of stayed in the pocket, and that's the, like, if you listen to Believe It, people never talk about Tony Newton, and Tony Newton is fantastic. Tony Newton is fantastic, but we're so blown away by Alan, and both Allens, Pasqua and Holdsworth,
Right.
and so that we're, nobody talks about Tony Newton, and Tony Newton's effing incredible on those records. So anyway,
let me do a little housekeeping real quick.
Please do.
Just want to let the folks know, as the FCC requires, that you are listening to WKCR FM New York, WKCR HD-1. Maybe you found us at WKCR.org. If you're a listener here in the New York City area and you want to make your friends jealous of how good the radio is here, you could tell them to find us on the web at WKCR.org. You can also tell them to listen to Deep Focus anytime they want. It's on that little box in your pocket. It's on your phone right now. You can find Deep Focus on Apple Podcasts or what have you.
Yeah, it's wonderful to really I'm just going to say Deep Focus is just a remarkable series of podcasts, and there's so much music you haven't heard, and the perspectives from the various guests are just very, from people that were on, that have inside knowledge, people who are just fans. It's really for a music podcast, I mean, it's top shelf. It's a fantastic series, and it's a real public service.
Thank you, Vernon.
I believe that.
This one tonight, by the way, is of a piece with some of the shows you and I have done together, and there's some bangers in there. But also, I think of the show I did with Brian Charette on Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Yeah.
The one I did with Ben Tyree on Frank Zappa. The one I did with Arturo O'Farrell on Steely Dan. This whole moment and movement, a lot of these pieces fit together, and I know a lot of listeners are been along for the ride. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, It's interesting to hear this band, and of course, the things that are going on inside of it, but still, the music is so wonderfully realized, and it's so wonderfully, like hearing Joe Beam, like Stoneflower. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I mean, and in fact, that's, I think, the first time I've heard Stoneflower live, like a live version of Stoneflower.
I should run down the pieces that we heard. So once again, it's this is Seattle, 1972, really in the wake of the studio craft of making of Caravanserai. We came up with some gems. We're not even going to get to half the stuff that we had pulled. There's actually a collection of studio outtakes from that album that are really interesting for another night. But we heard Incident at Neshabur. You heard the Santana, again, quoting Afro Blue in there, showing maybe some of what he had in his mind about this music. Bombele and All the Love of the Universe theme, echoing back to, that's Caravanserai too, isn't it?
All Love of the Universe, yeah, absolutely.
Stoneflower, Waiting, and Castillos de Arena. Mm-hmm. And there's more coming. You know what I want to ask you about, Vernon? Is the aesthetics of this, which we haven't really talked about, and in particular, if you want to tie it together, an experience, a near out-of-body experience I know you had recently, hearing something you created coming back to you from your television.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. So, I don't know if I'm a huge sci-fi and horror fan.
Huge.
Big time. And one thing, when I'll talk about things that influenced me, and one thing that I neglected to say for years, one pivotal show was the Twilight Zone. The Rod Serling's Twilight Zone was a pivotal event in forging my worldview. It was like Rod Serling was like one of the first TV people to actually, most of what was happening on TV was the unreality of the aspiration of the American dream. You know what I mean? Father Knows Best, the Andy Griffith Show, and all that, the Situation, kind of Dick Van Dyke, all that jazz, right? But Rod Serling was one of the first people to come on the television and say, everything is not as it seems. Everything is not as it seems. And, what I'm going to tell you is not going to necessarily have a happy resolution. Like every other thing, like the detectives on TV cop shows have an insane clearance rate,
right? Yeah,
and it's quite
they're never wrong,
and it's quite disconcerting. And there are never any wrongful convictions, right? So for somebody, I remember the first time somebody said, "Well, the clearance rate on murder is like maybe at best 70%." The TV shows are lying to us. Like all these cops are solving all the crimes, right? And the other thing too is that things would end, and the end would be, it was all a dream, and everything is as it was, and somebody waves a wand or something. Well, the Twilight Zone, that didn't happen like that. In fact, the endings of the Twilight Zone, you go, oh man, that's not going to work out.
There was always that moment. You get to that moment, a few minutes in, maybe before the first commercial, like, oh, wait, we're not. Oh, no.
No, oh, no, It's like when the guy steps on his glasses in the library.
That's right at the end.
Anyway, yeah, so okay, so sci-fi and horror, and in particular, this is... Okay, so this thing I'm going to say happened for the band, or with the band Living Color. The show, the kind of epic, it's been around for 11 seasons. The show The Walking Dead had its final episode last week. So it's the series, not just the season finale, but it's not just the season, but it's the series finale of The Walking Dead.
And you've been hooked on this show.
I've been hooked on the
show.
I've been, I've pretty much all 11 seasons. And there were moments where I fell up, but then I would binge and catch up, And we licensed, we got a request to license the Living Color song Cult of Personality. And of course, I was like, hell's yeah, let's, and I was thrilled about it. And then last week, last Sunday, I watched the episode, and the usage of Cult of Personality was not just as a kind of interstitial thing. It literally was woven into the finale. It's woven into the plot. It's actually impactful.
It's actually eidetic. It's used. It's not just soundtrack. It's actually in the action that you're seeing.
It's in the action. So I was speechless. I was floored, and it was so incredibly satisfying,
and a major plot point turns on it.
And a major plot point turns on the playing of this tune. And
that you wrote and created,
that we wrote and created, and it's just it was a very, to say surreal moment. It was a surreal moment, and it's because that culture has meant so much to me. Now, the corollary to that is The Walking Dead would not exist if it wasn't for George Romero many years ago, and his film Night of the Living Dead. And Night of the Living Dead has this distinction of it's the first horror film that features an African-American protagonist, Dwayne Jones, the great Dwayne Jones. And it's so naturalistic, and it's about so much of what the social, in the 60s when it happened. So I remember seeing Night of the Living Dead, and that, because at one point, just to see anybody black on TV, now people don't even realize how rare it was. And to see someone, George Romero's incredibly courageous, decision to cast Dwayne Jones in the lead, and even to the point of the ending, which is a devastating thing. So to jump cut from that to the finale of The Walking Dead, the wonderful creation of Robert Kurtzman, and it just felt like the closing of a circle of thinking about Frank Darabont and Bill Kurtzman and all the wonderful people, all the great people that worked. It just feels, I can't even begin to say, but it was very, very, very great. And yeah.
Well, let me turn a little facet on that. Thinking about, tell me,
Robert Kurtzman,
the connection of the aesthetics of your appreciation of that and the music and what we're listening to tonight from Santana, and if you want to pull in also what you create with A Living Color and connection with what you create in other kinds of music.
Well, part of this thing is also about, Malcolm Gladwell, in one of his books talks about like, if you're born in a certain year, you're going to be exposed to certain things, and those things that you're exposed to are going to affect how you see the world and the things that you're available to create. Talks about the fact that computers were introduced into the California school system right at the time when
Steve Jobs
and Bill Gates and Paul Allen were in school. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it happened in this particular sequence, and they were right at the age for that to happen. I mean, I grew up in a New York. I grew up as a child of immigrants, but I grew up in a New York where, like, to talk about, this city was a city of districts: the Flower District, the Garment District, the Music District. And the Music District on 48th Street, it was a place where all the musicians, so well-known people, up-and-comers, people doing club dates, wedding bands, everybody went to get their instruments there. And because of that, there would be things, unusual meetings would happen. You would run into your musical heroes, they're buying drumsticks or whatever. And there were just remarkable, stories, like one of the salesmen in one of the guitar shops, wound up joining a really well-known band. And it's kind of one of these things that becomes a almost like a mythological thing. That dude is now, he's touring with them,
Yeah.
So anyway, there's a whole milieu about the time period, and the things that we were all exposed to, like knowing that Prince heard Sly and the Family Stone at the same time that I heard Sly and the Family Stone, because we were both born in '58. We heard Weather Report at the same time, and I could hear, like there's no Prince in the Revolution without Sly and the Family Stone.
Right.
I could hear, when I hear the intro to 1999, I know that he heard Mysterious Traveler. I know he heard Joe Zawinul and Mysterious Traveler. You know what I mean? And so things like that are a part and parcel of the weave of things. Like hearing on Broadway, and the fact that George Benson says, they're dead wrong, I know they are, because I can play this here guitar. And the fact that his whole career in jazz is encapsulated in this one line, and he's playing live, and the audience bursts into spontaneous applause.
Oh, yeah.
Because, those factors were there to connect. Those dots were there to be connected. And so on and so forth. Oliver Nelson, doing blues and the abstract truth, but at the same time having a successful career, in TV, doing themes and things like that. So all of those parts and all of the tumult and all of the things that went sideways, the war, all the assassinations, all of the things are part of the background. You know, the fact that we were, you know, like the X-Men, we're the children of the atom, right? Like we, you know, like we came up during the Cold War, and the dissolution of the Cold War literally meant, okay, this way of looking at things has now shifted. The Berlin Wall, you know, we drove, Shannon and Bruce and Melvin and I and Henry and Zane, we drove through Checkpoint Charlie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we went through that and we saw the Berlin Wall come down. And Checkpoint Charlie was moved to be part of a museum. Like all of that is part and parcel of what defined not just in one genre but across genres. I recently went to the Basquiat show, and you know, John Michel. It's interesting when you go through the Basquiat show, which is still in town. Look it up and go. But you know, some of his first early drawings are of Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Wow.
You know, so he was connecting to culture. It's like the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, and that show was written, you know, in such an oblique way. You know what I mean? And that and Boris Badenov again,
right? Back
to the Cold War, Natasha and Boris, right? So all of these archetypical things and all these cliched things are all part of a great becoming. How we became. What and who and what we became. The fact that we talked about instrumental hits, but because of the fact that, you know, people had band practice. People played a note on the trumpet badly, but, you know, they could hear when Chuck Mangione came on, they said, oh, you know, I played trumpet in high school, right? So this is a nationwide trend when music and certain things are taken out of the curriculums, right? You know, those things, it changed a certain kind of connective tissue between and amongst Americans, you know, died. It's not just about, it's about a connective thing, and our connective collective listening was altered because those things were removed, and because they were not valued, that has had just a net effect, you know, across the board.
Yeah.
You know, and we're living with, you know, the effects, and of course the whole other things have come through. A whole other, you know, way of thinking about things has entered into it. But even those things have evolved and changed into, we don't even know what.
Right, what they're becoming,
and it's becoming, and you know, and how is it affecting us, and what is it appealing? It's appealing to something darker and problematic, and to start to come to grips with all of what that is. I mean, you know, the thing. It is all of it's inspiring music. A lot of it we don't get to hear because, you know, there's too much of everything.
Well, taking it back,
and not enough of other things. You know?
That's true. Vernon Reid is my guest. The show's called Deep Focus, and our attention wanders from time to time, but always comes back.
Deep focus. The ironic because when I'm a guest, you know,
broad focus. Broad focus is the name of the show. And but our attention does return to Carlos Santana and his band Santana, and this one night of October 15th, 1972, at the University of Washington in Seattle. We're going to bounce back in there in just a minute, but I'm just, you know, thinking, listening to what you're saying and thinking about what I hear in this music, and what I hear is a tremendous joyousness and lightness and optimism and communality and a kind of discovery of possibilities. It's an expanding universe. I don't hear that in a lot of music in the same way today, but I'm just enjoying it as it comes, listening to this show.
Yeah, it's an interesting, part of it is band, a collective voice as opposed to an individual, like a collective voices with a common goal as opposed to individual voices who are together for convenience sake.
It really certainly does sound like this ain't just a gig for any of these guys.
Right.
They mean it. And these guys, once again, I'll tell you the rundown. Carlos Santana is on guitar, and as Vernon was saying earlier, kind of the leader, kind of a cooperative band too, perhaps.
Kind of leader, yeah. He's, that's part of the thing. That's, he's becoming the iconic center of the experience, which is, and
would become more so. This is a really interesting moment. We've been doing a lot of talking. I want to get back to the music.
Please do.
But
please.
I was just going to say that there's this moment when there is not. This might be the last time there isn't a lead vocalist, because Leon Thomas would join the band in a matter of a couple of months, and I don't know if there was ever another time when there wasn't.
Well, they.
In any case,
okay.
Tom Coster and Richard Kermode, both playing keyboards. Tom Coster, piano. Richard Kermode on organ. Doug Rausch, bassist. Michael Shreve on drums. And Mingo Lewis, congas. Chepito, timbales. Armando Peraza, congas. And once again, it's October of 72 in Seattle. This is from the WKCR archives. Shall we? Is there more?
Sure.
Should I go? Let it rip. It's Deep Focus on WKCR. Vernon, you think they're going to come back out? I think we can get them to do an encore. Oh, I hope they'll do an encore. Here they come. Here they come. They're coming back out. They're coming back out. You did not want that to end.
It's beautiful.
That was the business. Can't say the word I was thinking of.
Yeah, you can't. No, you can't.
But that was the business. That was obviously live recording, you could tell. And if you just joined us, boy, did you blow it, because we've been having the best time here for the last 3 hours. The show's called Deep Focus. Vernon Reid, my guest.
Hey.
Hoo-ha. And Vernon, thank you for bringing our attention to this band, Santana, and this critical moment. 1972, just finished in the studio making Caravanserai and taking it out on the road and letting it rip, opening it up.
Absolutely. No, it's a beautiful period of the band, of this particular musician's career, the band's career, and it's a very special moment. And it's also a very special moment overall in the culture of the collision of rock and jazz and improvised music and progressive ideas and combining cultures, and it's incredibly powerful. Yeah, so it's a very formative, and it was a very formative thing in particular for me, and really generations of players and music listeners. So
yeah, I mean, based on...
Thank you for digging this stuff up. It's incredible.
It's a pleasure. I don't know if I would have found my way to this without the recommendation. And I got to say, the calls we've been getting and the presence online, people are feeling it. People that remember this and people that are maybe discovering it for the first time. And if you did blow it, I gave you a little bit of a hard time about that. But you should know this show will go up next week and join hundreds of others. Some like it, some different, some you might enjoy, and all vibrant episodes of Deep Focus. It's called Deep Focus. You'll find it on your favorite podcasting app. And I'm your host, Mitch Goldman. And it's all free, no advertising or anything. And there's tons of great stuff there to discover. You can listen anytime you want. You could download it. You could send it to your friends. And if you like it, let us know. And like it up and subscribe. And I'm kind of amazed how few people take advantage of that, but I think more will discover it if you let them know that you get it, you dig it.
Absolutely. This is important stuff. It's important, it's kind of like these documents, like who these artists were when they were just transmitting their messages, transmitting their music. It's beautiful.
How do people keep up with all the stuff you're doing? All the gigs?
Well, I was
a moving target.
I was gonna say, you could always find me on Twitter, but Jesus, but I'm Vert22, on Twitter, and I'm also Vert22 on Mastodon. I don't know where that's gonna go, but just open the Mastodon account, and you could find me with my photographs and stuff on Instagram. And I'm Vernon Reid on Facebook.
And Vert, V-U-R-N-T 22.
V-U-R-N-T 22, yeah.
And, and you always have your hands in
different things. I'm actually going to be, the great alternative radio station WFUV is about to have their Christmas thing on December the 6th, and it looks like I'm going to be sitting in with the bright, fantastic young bluesman known as Kingfish. I might be doing a tune with him. I just did a thing with Mike Doty last night at Union Pool and things like that. So that's happening December 6th, and, other things all points east.
Vernon, thank you so much for coming up. And
thank you for inviting me. This is beautiful. This is really, really powerful.
All right, we'll leave you with a little last taste and keep it tuned. Jacob's coming up next. Pop Talk with Omar Apollo.
All right.
Keep it right here. It's WKCR FM New York, WKCR HD-1, WKCR.org. We're Deep Focus. I'm Mitch Goldman here with my guest Vernon Reid. Last word goes to Carlos Santana.
And we out.